What's up, college sports fans? I'm Stucky.
I'm Colin Wilson.
I'm Mike Calabrese.
I'm Maria Marino.
I'm Charlie DiSturco, and we're excited that the Big Bets on Campus brand is launching its very own YouTube channel.
You'll be able to find every episode of the BBOC podcast, live shows, and other college sports content on this new channel.
Not only will the channel be dedicated to betting on college sports, but you'll also be able to find exclusive interviews with former college athletes,
college football power rankings,
and updates on other topics like the brand new College Football 25 video game series and the ins and outs of the recruiting trail all the way down to the transfer portal.
Whether you're into college football,
college basketball,
college baseball, or any of the college sports,
we are the home for college sports, and BBOC is the channel for you.
Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the action. I'll see you there.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new season of Wondergoal, the soccer betting podcast from the Action Network, presented to you by Bet365. My name is Michael Leboff, and joining me for this season are BJ Cunningham and Sam Ingram from bettingexpert.com. Sam is back. We had such a good time with him in the Euros. Football didn't come home, but it almost came home once again. We'll try again in 2026. But for this, we will be talking Premier League. We'll be talking about our favorite futures, do a little season preview stuff, outrights, relegation, top fours, top six, top half, bottom half, point totals, golden boot, golden glove, top assist, and we're going to cover everything here. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to get right into it. We don't want to waste your time. Season starts in a couple days. We're recording this on August the 8th, so we're just over a week away from the start of a brand new Premier League season. BJ, I'm just going to open up blank canvas. If you had to pick one future bet, I don't care what it is, what category it comes from, one that is at the top of your list, one that you would actually rush to the window to make there in Iowa, what would it be?
Newcastle top four at 2-1 would be my favorite pick of anything that I have on this board. You know, I think if we look at Newcastle's season last year, it was one that was riddled with injuries, match fixture pileups, and just honestly, it went south in a hurry. But over the last about 2.5 months of the season, Newcastle really turned it on and was legitimately the third best offense in the Premier League. Now we're coming into a new season where they haven't sold anybody significantly in the transfer market. They haven't really bought anybody significant, but they are rumored to be in for a lot of really good players that could really strengthen their squad. And the main thing about Newcastle is we saw 2 years ago how great they were under Eddie Howe's system that is very reliant on intensity and physicality, just playing one match a week and only focusing on the Premier League. They get to do that again this season because they're not playing in Europe. So I think with Newcastle, how their squad is honestly stayed together, they're going to get a lot of the key guys that they had injured for most of the season back. I think they're set up perfectly to make a run at the top four. And I think that the Premier League, as it's structured right now, is very similar to La Liga, where you have 3 teams that are kind of at the top and above everybody else. And that fourth spot is up for grabs. And I think Newcastle is positioned better than all these other teams to get to that fourth spot. So I like them at 2-1 to finish in the top 4.
All right, Sam, welcome back. We're very happy to have you here for this Premier League season. What about you?
Yes, gents, thrilled to be back. Thanks for having me. I just want to quickly say, more importantly, before we go on, Michael, that mustache is looking brilliant. Fair play to you. But yeah, my favourite outright, Alexander Isak, top goal scorer, each way at 16-1. So I'm kind of just going to piggyback onto what BJ was saying. I really like the thought of Newcastle this season without European football, without European commitments, and Eddie Howe having all week to prepare his team on the training pitch for a game on the Saturday. I really like the thought of that. And for me, Alexander Isak ticked a lot of boxes for to be top goal scorer. Hit over 20 goals last season, didn't play the majority of the season. I think with Isak, the main concern in this kind of market is he going to be fit enough for the whole of the season? Where if you look at the summer he's just had, and if you look at, if you consider the campaign he's got coming up ahead of him with no Europe, as I mentioned, then I think that main concern, that main red flag is quelled a little bit. So it'll be my favourite outright. Yeah, Alexander Isak, top goal scorer each way, 16-1.
All right, for me, we're just going to stay on this Newcastle train. I like TriCast. You can get it at Bet365. Manchester City finishing first, Newcastle finishing second, and Arsenal finishing third. That's 100-1. Don't need to really go into it too much because you guys talked about the love for Newcastle we have here. One thing I do find funny here is that there was all that talk about Newcastle when the Saudis took over the team. They had a ton of hype going into last season. Like their number just shortened all summer long to win the title. Then everyone kind of forgot about it. It's like the Saudis never even came in. They're kind of laying in wait here. They look like a little bit of a post-hype team. So I think finishing second is definitely on the cards. They're in that 10, 12-1 to do so. I'd much rather try to nail it with a tri-cast, and you can even do Arsenal, Newcastle, City if you're an Arsenal believer. But we do feel pretty confident that it'll be City, Arsenal in at the top, and if Newcastle can be the gate crasher, you have a chance for a really fun sweat if they can turn it into a 3-horse race. All right, so those are our favorite outrights. Now let's get into it. We'll do some more big picture stuff, give out some bets along the way for outrights, relegation, etc., etc. Let's size up the odds. Of course, these odds are from our friends at Bet365, who are our sponsor once again this season. We thank them for that, keeping the lights on for us here at Wondergoal. But before we get to that, a reminder that Wondergoal is proudly presented by Bet365, and Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than anyone else. Every day they power up the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays, and they don't stop there. Keep an eye out for their biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boost. Check out the boost and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. You must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, New Jersey, Ohio, North Carolina, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. If you or anyone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, please call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. Manchester City. Wouldn't you know, they are your clear and consensus favorites to win the Premier League. It would be 5 on the spin for them, extending their record. They became the first team to 4-peat. Now they'll look to become the first team to 5-peat. They're plus 110. Arsenal is the second choice at plus 187. Then a little bit of a jump to Liverpool at 7-1. Then a bigger jump to Chelsea at 20. Man United at 22. Tottenham 25. Newcastle 33. And Villa at 50. Brighton 150-1. West Ham, Palace, Bournemouth, no matter what, we can keep going. But that's really where we should stop. BJ, you're an Arsenal supporter. You were, I guess they kind of strung you along last year.
Yeah, a little bit. It was fun.
A little bit. But you never really gave up hope. Is this number good enough?
Michael, it's the hope that kills you.
It is the hope that kills you. Especially with that team. And I also saw that Mikel Arteta hired a bunch of professional pickpockets to go around at a dinner for his team to show them to always be alert. I think that could be the difference maker. Is that enough to push you over the edge?
Of course.
Plus 187?
I was already over the edge, and now I'm just diving straight into the pool. So, I came to last season, and I said that, I thought that Arsenal and City were even teams. And I think how the season played out, that ended up being true. Arsenal had a better expected goal differential than City over the entire course of the season. And first, I want to kind of dive into City because I think there is some real regression signs for them. And I know we say that like every season, and now they've won 4 straight. But, I think the real regression signs come for them defensively. Last season, they allowed 0.95 expected goals per 90 minutes, which I know sounds like a great number. But you compare that to the season before, and it was 0.83. And the season even before that, it was 0.67. So I think there's some clear regression for them defensively. And really what it comes down to, and we said it all last season, is that their press is not as good as it once was. Last season, they finished 9th in passes per defensive action and 11th in opponent build-up completion percentage allowed. It's been a pretty quiet summer for City. They bring in Savio for the third left winger that they really didn't need to begin with. And I think selling Julian Alvarez is, and obviously the transfer window is not closed and they can still do business. But if they don't sign another striker, Haaland is the only striker they have on the roster. And I get he's the best striker in the world. But he dealt with a lot of injuries last season, specifically that foot injury, which was a very nagging injury for him throughout the entire season. And guess what? The Champions League's expanded, so you're playing more matches. And so Haaland can't play every single match. So City has to go out and find another striker. And quite frankly, I don't think they're really going to find a striker to the quality of Julian Alvarez. So with City's those numbers kind of declining defensively, you have to sit back and ask, okay, like how do they really improve defensively? They haven't made any signings, so it's kind of be the same old. Also last season, we forget that in 10 matches against the Big Six in the Premier League, City only won 3 of them. 2 of them came against that putrid Manchester United team that we'll get to later in the podcast. And 1 came against Tottenham in the second to last day that they didn't even really need to win, and then a loss would have cost their rivals the title. So I think that Arsenal is in a well position and should be priced accordingly, evenly with City. We know that Arsenal is the best out of possession team in the world. They only allowed 0.73 expected goals per 90 minutes last season. The question marks that surround Arsenal is, can they get to the level of City from open play? As it currently stands, I do believe Arsenal needs to buy a striker. There are rumors that they might be willing to meet Napoli's asking price for Victor Osimhen, which if that happens, they definitely should be the same price as Manchester City. But even as the team is currently constructed, I mean, kind of going off on a tangent a little bit, they signed Calafiori from Bologna this summer. You essentially have 6 center backs now that you can interchange across your back line. I was thinking of the other day how Arsenal can play like a 6-3-1 and just go straight terrorism ball and just not let anybody score. Because it's honestly, I don't know how a lot of teams score on Arsenal this season. I mean, last year, only in 5 Premier League matches, teams created over 1 non-penalty expected goal against them. 5 matches. And now they get another center back. They bring Urian Timber back from injury. They have everything across their back line. They have depth. They have, for my money, the second best defensive midfielder in the Premier League in Declan Rice. Saka, Martinelli, Odegaard, even Havertz as a false 9. Arsenal is well positioned, and they still averaged 2 expected goals per 90 minutes last season. It wasn't a bad offense. So I think Arsenal should be priced accordingly with City in terms of the odds. So I like Arsenal at plus 190. That's the best price you can find right now. They do play City, I believe, the 3rd or 4th match of the season at Manchester City. So if you wanted to wait on that price, you probably could to see what happens in that match. But in any case, I projected this out, and I have City at 87.4 points and Arsenal at 87.1. So I think they're even teams. So I think the odds should be reflecting that. So I like Arsenal at plus 190.
Yeah, they play City the 5th match of the season.
5th match, excuse me. Yep.
They have Wolves, Villa, and Brighton before the international break. Then it's the North London Derby and City right
it's
up.
Tough. Yeah, it's tough opening. So you could probably wait.
Which is what, the tried and true method has been, just wait for the City number to drift. Maybe you're suggesting to wait for Arsenal. I talked about my way I'd attack the outright market. I think you should try to plug Newcastle in at second with either City or Arsenal over the top as in a forecast or a tri-cast. Because I do think that Newcastle has the opportunity to nip one of them if they do come back. Like you talked about it, BJ, the Haaland issue. Is there any depth behind him? City's played so much soccer over the past few years. Do they just tire out? Like Kevin De Bruyne, those kind of key contributors, they just don't stop playing. So I think there are paths for them both to come back to the pack a little bit and turn this into a 3-4 horse race rather than just the 2-horse race that we've seen, as we get to the last 2 or 3 match weeks of the season. So Newcastle would be my team to start nipping at the heels here, Sam, because Liverpool with the change, it's maybe the number's just too thin to get involved considering Klopp leaving. So I'd much rather take a shot with Newcastle to finish behind one of these juggernauts. Any thoughts on from you on this title race?
Yeah, I can see why you take Newcastle on. If quickly go back to what BJ was saying and Julian Alvarez leaving and on the need to replace him. He played 36 Premier League games last season, 7 Champions League matches, although in the Champions League, a lot of them were from the bench. Edison might be off to Saudi Arabia potentially. If you think of Julian Alvarez, you think of backup to Haaland. If he leaves, it's not the end of the world, but you need more than 11 players to compete for and win a Premier League title. So, and that it shows his quality. He's going for 90 odd million, I think 80 million. So, if he leaves, they definitely need to replace him. And in terms of the outrights in the Premier League, I have the same opinion as most people on this, similar to the bookmakers. I think City should win it in what might be Pep's final season if the players know that he's off, and that's common knowledge in the dressing room. And this is his last campaign that they'll get with him. They're going to run through brick walls for him, even more so than they do now. I like Arsenal to be with them all the way. very strong from defense all the way up to the top end of the pitch. We've seen that. BJ's gone through their numbers last season. I'm hopeful Gabriel Jesus and Martinelli can have a bigger impact this season. And also, as BJ said, that they may well recruit up at the top end of the pitch before the window is out too. City at plus 110, Arsenal at plus 190. I think the bookmakers are on the same wavelength as us. It's not something I'm going to bet on. I'm not interested in taking this on in the slightest, really. I think Arsenal are too short, but that is largely because of the Lumen points deduction for City, which may or may not ever come. City at plus 110, but only 16-1 to be relegated because of the charges. So I don't think you can bet on them with any real conviction. And because of that, Arsenal are much shorter than they would have been. But yeah, on the field, Arsenal are still going to have to compete with this City side, which have won 4 on the bounce. Now, Manchester City are not unbeatable, but they're not far off it. So in terms of taking a bet here, I'm not too keen in getting involved. As a punter, I think you want everything laid out in front of you when you're approaching a market. You want to know the ins and the outs of what you're betting on. This is like betting in general, especially on the football. On soccer, it's really tough. Like it's not easy, and so you need all the cards laid out on the table, and I just don't think we have it here. So I think we're in the dark a little bit at the prices, and with everything that's going on, I'm not keen to take either City or Arsenal. You mentioned Liverpool there. Plenty of question marks there as well. We don't really know what we're going to get. They may come out on fire and they may tear the league up. We don't know. It's not something I really want to take on at the prices either. If I was going to have a little bit of money, it would probably be on Tottenham or Newcastle.
Yep. Yeah, I can agree with you there.
One thing I want to mention about City's charges, from what I've read, and we'll get into this later because unfortunately that's the case. We got to talk about all lawyers and off the field stuff. But from what I've read, it looks like their court date is this upcoming summer. So I think they're going to let Pep walk out the door, head held high, and then the charges come down, I think is what they're going to do. But I don't know.
I would be shocked if the lawyers.
It would be funny. It would be funny. Be a real shame too. Be a real shame.
All right, let's move on to the bottom of the table then. The race at the bottom a lot of times is a lot more fun, although it's been flipped the past couple seasons than the race at the top. To be relegated, Leicester City, who just won the championship by 1 point over Ipswich Town. They are minus 250 to go right back down to the championship. We'll get into why in a second. Ipswich is also odds on at minus 138. Southampton, the third newly promoted team, they yo-yoed back up. They're plus 125. Everton, the juggernauts, are plus 175. Nottingham Forest, who also had a points deduction last year, along with Everton, they are 2-1. Wolverhampton plus 350. Brentford plus 500. Fulham plus 550. Bournemouth is 9-1. Palace is 9-1. City is 16-1. West Ham, Brighton 20. Chelsea also 20. Villa, United, triple digits. So is Newcastle, Tottenham. There's no really reason to get into Arsenal, Liverpool. There's really no really real reason to get outside of those first 8 to 10 teams plus City that I mentioned. Okay, so the situation is that Leicester City is pretty. It's imminent that they're going to get a points deduction. We just don't know how much. I've heard the error bars 6 points to 16. Obviously, if it's 16 points, we're dealing with a major catastrophe, and there's really no point for them to even play the season anymore. I'm going to guess it's going to lean more towards like 6, and because of what I just said. Who knows, though, how this bears out, though, Sam. It's such a confusing market to bet. It should be so black and white, but now it's so confusing because of financial fair play, what we saw with Everton last year, what we saw with Forest, and now what we're going to see with Leicester. The one team that I'm trying to build around, though, is Fulham. I think Fulham is going to be close enough to the relegation battle, even if as long as Leicester doesn't get absolutely paddled. So Ipswich, Southampton, Fulham as a relegation tri-cast to go down is 40-1. That's really the only bet I can get even remotely excited about in this market, just because everything is just so convoluted with the lawyers, and I don't know. Leicester City's in the dock. I don't know what you got here.
Yeah, that's interesting. Are you opting for Fulham because of Palhinha? Is that the main
and my thought? I don't trust them to score enough. And without him winning the ball in the midfield, they were really, we changed our tune on Fulham quite a bit throughout last season, that they started to become a team that could actually start to defend. They became like almost an opposite version of themselves from the previous season under Silva. And I also don't know if Silva's going to stick around the whole season. I feel like if he's the type of guy that's always kind of connected to other jobs, and if a big job in Spain opens up, or he's going to be mentioned, or and could he walk out of this team, and who's going to score their goals? Not totally sure. I know that they've brought in BJ's guy, Emil Smith-Rowe. Don't think he's going to set the world alight. So they're the team that I kind of want to build around to add a price to this market, just because I don't think you're going to get good prices otherwise. So you got to take a shot. Fulham would be my pick. I think BJ and I are both relatively bullish on Brentford having a better season than they were last year.
Mhm.
The whole world is bullish on Bournemouth and Palace, so I don't think that they're going to be involved in it. God knows how Brighton's going to be, but I don't think that they've got too much talent to be in there. So the one team of the three teams that kind of feel like they'll be in there with the newly promoted teams, Everton, Nottingham Forest, and Fulham, the prices are just so much better on Fulham. So I'm going to try to build around them.
That makes sense. I've seen them linked with Andre from Fluminense in Brazil.
Yep.
If they can get someone of that quality over the line, obviously he may or may not be Premier League ready. He's not got the experience, and it's big shoes to fill, but they really need to get someone in. I think they will. So be interesting to see who they get in. But in terms of the relegation picks I've got in front of me, I've actually got 3 picks. Because I'm a bit greedy. So my first one, and they're not all in the relegation market itself, but they're kind of born from it. So I've got Ipswich higher than Leicester at -120 is probably the smallest price you have on this podcast today. Southampton relegated at +175, and Leicester bottom on Christmas Day at +120. So I like Southampton to be relegated. I think that's the value pick for me in the relegation market in the Premier League at the prices. However, I'm more hot on Ipswich outdoing Leicester and Leicester having a bad season than I am on Southampton getting relegated. So that's where I'm going to head with this. Got a question, lads. How many points do you think Leicester will return from the 17 games from the opening day up until Christmas? I'll give you a bit more information. Bear in mind that Leicester's aim this season is to survive, obviously. So looking at last season at Christmas, Forest, who are one place in 17th above the relegation zone, they had 14 points come Christmas Day. So how many do we think Leicester are going to have?
Oh boy. Are we counting the points deduction?
No, not yet. That's my job.
I would probably say that they'll be at 15 or 16 would be.
Yeah, I would say between like 14 and 18.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people will be along those lines, and I don't want to keep speaking about it because it is boring. But what Michael touched on in terms of the points deductions, everything I've read, I think this is going to be the biggest points deduction from a PSR breach that we've ever had. So we could have 15, 16, even 12. So let's be conservative and say Leicester get a 9-point points deduction. That would take them down to probably 4, 5, 6 points. And I think it's in everyone's best interests. The Premier League, Leicester, the club, the fan base, in terms of like a competitive, the Premier League being a competitive landscape, is in everyone's best interest to get this points deduction out of the way. We don't want another Everton, and we definitely don't want another Forest, which came in March of last season. We don't want that. That's a farce. No one wants that. So I think this points deduction is imminent, and I think it's going to come before Christmas. So you can get Leicester bottom on Christmas Day at +120. I really like that. And I know about 10 minutes ago, I was saying, don't be betting on things where all the cards aren't laid out on the table. And this is exactly what I'm telling you to do here. So I'm a bit mindful about that. So that's probably why I've got the other 2 selections that I mentioned above Leicester bottom on Christmas Day. But it's an interesting angle, and I think it's one that people should maybe consider and just keep an ear out to see, how the procedure's moving on. My other bet, Ipswich higher than Leicester. If Leicester get a big old points deduction, and I don't like regardless of the deductions, I think Leicester's squad, it has to be one of the weakest in the division in my eyes. Keenan Dewsbury-Hall, their best player in the Championship, was brilliant in the Championship. He's gone to Chelsea. Maresca didn't want to stick around to sample Premier League football either. They look really light up top. And another question, gents, like who scores the goals to keep Leicester in the Premier League?
Jamie Vardy Party is back.
That's a Daka, Jamie
37.
Vardy, just like always.
37 years old. I was looking at that yesterday. I was like, he's like the favorite to be their top goal scorer. And I'm like, really? At 37?
I would love nothing more than Jamie Vardy to hit 25, 30 goals, but it's unfortunate.
Put himself back on the radar for 2026.
Imagine. Yeah, no, I'd love it, but the chances are slim. So I'm really concerned for Leicester this season. You've got a squad which it doesn't look like it's full of goals or creativity, a manager that's coming in really tricky circumstances. So to get Leicester, I know it's an anti-post bet and you got to wait all seasons for a -120 to cash. And, you know, it's not thrilling. But for me, that's as close as, I don't want to say it, that's as close as banker material as I've seen in the Premier League, really around even money. So I really like that. But for the podcast, I'm going to put up Southampton relegated at +175. Because I think Leicester are going to be right down there, and I think Ipswich will probably be down there too. But in terms of Southampton, more than anything, it's their style of football and Russell Martin. And I think if they enter this Premier League season and play the way they did in the Championship and play Russell Martin's style of football, which he's put on show for us all the way through his career in the English Football League, I think he's going to get found out, and I don't think he's going to have a plan B, C or D. So that's my main reason. I think they're all three of them are going to be down there this season. But that's the value pick for me. Southampton relegated +175.
It's like what we saw with Company and Burnley last year, right? Like you got to
Exactly
you just got to have a plan B. You can't just run all over Manchester City with Burnley. BJ, thoughts here on relegation?
Yeah, along those same lines, I really like Ipswich to be relegated. And if you've been following me on Twitter, this is probably the biggest future position that I've taken in a really, really long time. But, you know, kind of going along the same lines of what Sam was saying about Southampton, you know, Kieran McKenna may very well be one of the, you know, brightest and best young managers out there. But I don't think that bringing a squad with the talent level of essentially Luton Town of last year and playing a style very similar to Burnley is going to work out at all. If you know anything about Ipswich, like they're very innovative. They like to build out of the back, like to use a lot of short passes, like to drop a lot of guys deep and build up. There's a lot of De Zerbi-esque type of things that come with Ipswich Town. You know, they controlled 53% of the ball in the Championship last season. But my question marks surrounding these teams, and I think we need to learn from what happened to Burnley last season. If you remember, Company came in, tried to play this aggressive build-up and aggressive pressing style, which, by the way, Ipswich had the best passes per defensive action mark in the Championship last season. They're very aggressive with their high press. That by November, Company had to switch to a 4-4-2, and then suddenly he didn't have a squad that was built to play a 4-4-2 counterattacking football. Like it just didn't work. So if you look at the business that Ipswich has done this season, they've brought in, you know, they've made Amari Hutchinson a permanent signing. They've brought in a good center back. They've brought in some depth along their back line, which obviously helps them, right? But my question marks are, you know, I mean, Ipswich's squad is valued at $90 million per transfermarket.com right now. Leicester's at $183 million, and they're in second to last place. So if you're bringing a squad of this low of talent level and trying to play a very modern build out of the back, high pressing style, to borrow Sam's phrase, you're going to get found out really quick, and you better have a plan B. And I'm not so sure that because of the talent level that they have assembled, that they actually have a plan B. I'm not sure, because we've seen, you know, we rag on Marco Silva a lot, but when Fulham came to the Premier League, he recognized from the get-go that they were not going to be able to play the way they played in the Championship. So he made them into a low block transitional type team. And you're starting to see them get better and better now that we're in year 3 of that, right? So you look at the bottom of the table, and obviously this price is -120 because there's points deductions everywhere, right? And I'll get to Everton in a second, who, you know, at worst, I guess we're looking at a 9-point administrative type of situation, I guess. But teams like Nottingham Forest, Wolves, Fulham, Brentford, Everton, what do all those teams have in common? They are really solid and at least average to above average teams defending in defensive blocks, defending their penalty area. From January on, Wolves had the worst expected goal differential in the Premier League. Like, they were, from an underlying data perspective, they were terrible. But they were the best team in the Premier League at defending their penalty area. And that is what kept them in the Premier League. And obviously, Gary O'Neill is a great tactician as well. I'm not so sure Ipswich is ready to defend and only hold 35% of the ball for most matches, because that is what's going to happen. In the championship last season, they were middle of the road in terms of blocking shots and defending crosses in their penalty area. One stat I love to use in terms of evaluating teams, how they play in low blocks, is final third to box entry conversion rate. Essentially, once a team enters the final third, how often are they getting in the penalty area? Ipswich was 12th in the championship. That is incredibly average. So again, even if Kieran McKenna comes in and plays this style, which I don't think is going to be successful, if he decides to switch to a plan B, I don't think they have the talent or the personnel to be able to defend in that type of area. Their midfield is so weak. If you go to transfermarket.com right now, I think they maybe have one player valued at over $1 million. Like, that is really, really weak. And they really need to do some business to bulk up that midfield and find some ball winners. Because if they don't, they're going to be in a world of trouble. So I think because of the low talent level, because of the style of play, and really the plan B, even if they go to plan B, their squad's really not set up to do that. I think Ipswich is going down, and they're going down in a hurry. So I really love them at -120 to be relegated. The other one I like, kind of going along the same lines of what Sam said about Leicester and Southampton, is all three newly promoted teams to be relegated at 5-1. I don't think people truly have grasped the financial impact of all three newly promoted teams going down last season, because as the Premier League payment structure, as it is structured, is the longer you stay in the Premier League, the more money you get, right? So teams like Nottingham Forest and Fulham and Bournemouth and Brentford, who have stayed in for now 3 or 4 years, are getting more and more money. And I know they're now in financial trouble in terms of financial fair play, but over the course of those 2 and 3 years, they've been able to spend money and get their squad to a level that is Premier League capable, and one that doesn't put them in the relegation zone. So obviously Leicester's in financial trouble. Southampton, like Sam said, I think they're in a world of hurt. Russell Martin's never managed in the Premier League. He can play, controlling 63% of the ball in the Championship and in League One, but trying doing that in the Premier League with the talent level they have is just not going to work. So all three promoted teams to be relegated at 5-1, I think has a lot of value. And finally, Michael, Everton to stay up at -250. From everything I've read about Everton, it's not going well in terms of finding new owners. They obviously have the stadium project going on that's costing them a lot of money. At worst, it sounds like they're going into administration, and it's an automatic 9-point deduction, if I'm not mistaken.
Bring it on.
Bring it on, because last season they had an 8-point deduction and they still finished with 42 points. And I would ask people, if this was like a college football game over the course of a season, if you gave Everton -9 against Ipswich or Southampton, who are you taking? I'm taking Everton all day, because I legitimately think they're 15 or 20 points better than both of those teams. So even if Everton gets a points deduction, that's the reason why they're only -250 to stay up. I think that number is way, way too short. So I like Everton to stay up. It'll be fun, taking a future at -250 to tie up for over the course of 8 months. But
Especially
I think there's a ton of value on it. So I'm with you, Michael, with Everton all year long to stay up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we talked so much about Everton down the stretch last season that I'm going to try to talk about them as little as possible here. They just got everyone nuts. All right, let's talk top 4, top 6 bets, top half if you want, bottom half. Those kind of bets, those placing bets. One team, and I'm going to save them for the end because I have you won't believe this, but I have a bet in the triple digits that I really like for this season. I wanted to give it off at the top, but I figured I'll save it for the end, keep people sticking around. I think there's 2 darlings this season, and one of them what is Crystal Palace, which was a darling 2 seasons ago with when Patrick Vieira looked like the next big thing, and they're back to being a darling again because it looks like Oliver Glasner is the next big thing. The other team is Bournemouth. I think, similarly, Andoni Iraola has kind of already proven himself to be a really, really sharp manager. The one concern I have about Iraola is similar to Silva. Like, I just don't know if he sticks around the entire season if a huge job opens up. That's really scary for this Bournemouth team, but assuming he does and he sees this thing out to the end of the year, I think Bournemouth 14-1 top 6. I think Bournemouth 50-1 in top 4. And like I said, I have a triple digit play I'll talk about later on Bournemouth. But I'm in on the Cherries here. I think that they're the team that could just fool around and all of a sudden find themselves in the top 6, a la Brighton a couple seasons ago. Just hang around. I know it's really hard to crash it. I mean, Chelsea finished 13 points ahead of like 8th or 9th last year, and they weren't very good. But Bournemouth, Sam, I think that they could be the team that really outruns their odds here. The scary thing, of course, and I know you'll go into this, is that they might lose their striker in the coming days.
Yes, I love that you bringing along a 3-digit Bournemouth-based punt to the pod, because I'm so pro Bournemouth this season. You mentioned Iraola. I think he's a brilliant coach. In terms of top 4, I've not got them down. I've not been as bold and as brave as you. In front of me, I've got Newcastle and Spurs, and I think Newcastle may get spoken about, so I'll kind of lean into Spurs. I don't know if you want to have a rant about Man United now, or we'll save it later in the show, because I'm fully on board. Just give me the nod. They're at plus 400 at the minute to get top 4, which doesn't interest me in the slightest. And I'll tell you what doesn't interest me even less. Chelsea at plus 137. Oh my goodness. Look, if you're looking at that and you're thinking, what, I like a bit of that, then you need a checkup of some kind.
A couple preseason games.
Yeah, that'll do it. So Chelsea and United, I'm just going to swerve them completely. I don't even need to get into it. I don't think it's fairly obvious. I'm shocked that Erik ten Hag is still in Manchester. I get it. I know why he's still there. There's no one really maybe to come in and take this squad right now to another level. Are there any managers kind of available with that skill set and who would be willing as well? Maybe not. But to move over to lean towards the Tottenham punt, yeah, I'm a big fan of Ange Postecoglou. His Spurs side for a lot of last season to watch at times were brilliant. Played some really good football, scored a lot of goals, and they just couldn't stick it out for the season. There were a lot of injuries. I can't remember which match it was, but there was one match where I think they lost like 3-4 players to injury. Every time like the ball kind of got put in from out of play, someone would be on the floor and they'd be off injured. So yeah, there were a lot of injuries, and that's why they didn't get top 4 or close to it last season. But they aim for this season. Ange's aim will be for top 4, and I fancy them to be right amongst it for that final Champions League place. I think the top 3 is probably sewn up if you want to include Liverpool in that. I think they'll be good enough to maybe get the top 3, maybe not. But yeah, of the odds in front of me, plus 200 neck and neck with Newcastle, I think I like that for Tottenham to kick on. If we can get those Tottenham performances and we can stretch it out for a 38-game season, I know they're in the Europa League, but if we can get that, I think they need a few more reinforcements. Dominic Solanke's mentioned up top. That'd be a great signing. If they don't get him, the kind of fees that are touted are around 65 million for a striker. If they don't get Solanke, you can imagine what kind of striker they're going to bring in. So I like Tottenham's chances. I want to see a little bit more activity in the window, but that's where I've ended in terms of top 4. Just quick mention to Villa, expanded Champions League format, 8 games instead of 6 in the group phase. It's not called group phase now, league phase, I think. I think all their eggs are going to be in the Champions League basket. They're not a club familiar with the Champions League. They're going to put everything into it, and it will take away from the Premier League. So that's why I've overlooked them. But I love Villa. I just think they'll miss out.
Yep. And as we know, and we say all the time on this podcast, we love that Villarreal team that Unai Emery took deep into the Champions League. Great tournament manager. He loves himself a tournament like that, BJ. So we'll see what kind of noise he can make with this new Swiss model. But what do you got here in these markets?
Yeah, I think Aston Villa is kind of interesting, and I think their summer has been. So they obviously sold Douglas Luiz, but they brought in so much depth because of the expanded Champions League. They're going to be playing so many matches, and they just brought in a ton of guys to be able to cope with that. So like Sam said, Unai Emery knows how to manage in the Champions League, and I think they're going to probably, like he said, they're going to put all those eggs in that basket. So I agree with that. I don't think there's really anything you can buy from Aston Villa in terms of top 4, top 6. But I mentioned earlier my favorite bet was Newcastle top 4. I even like if you want to do a 2 or even 3 unit play on Newcastle top 6, I think is honestly a great bet. So let's go through what happened with Newcastle last season. So they came in, if you remember, they pumped Aston Villa in the first match, just absolutely destroyed them. And they looked like the team that we saw that finished in top 4. Then they went through a bit of a lull. Then they went on a big winning streak. And then they hit a point where they were dealing with a ton of injuries and had Champions League obligations. So Eddie Howe couldn't unleash his patented high press, which, like I mentioned, is so necessary for that to be successful, is that not only having players fit, but being physical and being intense. So the requirements of those 3 things, it doesn't really work when you're playing 3 matches in a week and you have a bunch of injuries, right? So now we're in a position of they don't have to do that. So midway through the last season, they switched to like a passive 4-5-1 type of block, and that didn't work. If you remember, they went through a point where they lost 4 straight matches, one to City, Liverpool, Nottingham Forest, and to I believe it was Brentford as well. And that Liverpool match, they got 7 expected goals put on them. It was the most ever in a Premier League match. So then they were out of the Champions League. They were kind of, sitting in the middle of the table. And when we got to the end of January, that's when they really started to kind of turn things on. And from that point, it was the Aston Villa match on January 30th that Eddie Howe said, we're not doing the 4-5-1 anymore. We're just going back to our patent high press, and we're just going for it, right? And even if our squad is a little bit depleted, even if we have slow guys on our back line, they're gonna come up and aid in the press. And just it is what it is. We're going for it, which create a lot of high-scoring matches, which kind of goes along with Sam's point about Ishak being the top goal scorer, is they're going to be in a lot of high-scoring matches. But from January 30th on to the end of the season, Newcastle had a plus 11.5 expected goal differential. That was 4th in the Premier League behind the 3 dogs, Arsenal, City, and Liverpool. And I think we forget the injuries that they sustained. Joe Linton is a huge part of their high press. He's the most physical guy that they have in terms of marking the team's, opposing defensive midfielder. He was out for pretty much the entire second half of the season. Even Sven Botman, who is, you could say, arguably one of their best center backs, missed basically the entire second half of the season. Nick Pope as well, their starting goalkeeper, missed the second half of the season. They brought in Lloyd Kelly, which I think is a really smart signing for them, adds some depth across their back line, a guy who played in a kind of a similar system at Bournemouth. They're rumored to be in the market for Mark Gahey in the region of £65 million, which would be an incredible signing for them and really would put them over the edge. But now that they don't have Europe and they can focus just on the Premier League, I think Newcastle is in the exact same position they were 2 years ago. Yeah. And I think they're in way better position than Chelsea, than Manchester United. It's probably going to be close between them and Tottenham. But, this Newcastle team is set up so well. And their high press, nobody's really, when they're truly fit and able to figure it out, and nobody's really been able to figure it out. And also, Sandro Tonali's coming back at the end of August here from his suspension. So you add another midfielder there. Newcastle's set up so well here. So I like them top 4, 2-1, top 6, minus 120.
All right, let's talk top half, bottom half bets while we're here too. We were saying, Sam, we're all in on this Bournemouth team, so you want to go into that one?
Yes, please. So if we're looking at the top half finish betting, we've got 8 teams the bookmakers think are nailed on. So what we're looking at now is maybe 2 spots up for grabs. Got West Ham, Brighton, and both odds on. Palace, and then Bournemouth, which you can get at plus 450 in some places over here in the UK. Hopefully you can get that over there. Yeah, I love the Cherries under Iraola. Massive improvements from last season when he was able to get his ideas across and start piecing results together. I think he's such a good coach, and we saw as much in Spain. He's come over from Rayo Vallecano, and bar a sticky patch over the first 11 or 12 games, he's been a breath of fresh air down on the south coast of England. And like in terms of the neutral, like his football is brilliant to watch. It's like an aggressive press, operates in the opposition's half, nearer their 18-yard box. And really, he looks to put whoever they're playing under real pressure, and defenders want time on the ball. When the ball is at their feet, I don't care who you are. The game might be evolving and defenders becoming much more adept to receiving the ball under pressure, but you can be sure they'd much rather have 6, 7, 8 seconds to progress and move the ball than 1 or 2. So, I like Bournemouth. I think in every single Premier League game, we can expect them to really take the game to teams. And for a lot of clubs in the Premier League, they won't like that. They're going to pick up a lot of results, a lot of wins over the course of the season. Now they're entering the season knowing their style, philosophy, shape, however you want to dress it up. They're going into game 1 and they're ready. Last season, it was different. Obviously, it took them 11 or 12 games, as I mentioned. So in terms of getting top half over the line with a full 38 game stretch, I like the thought of that. We spoke about Dom Solanke going. It's a major concern linked with a 65 million pound move to Tottenham. I think that's his release clause, but I'm pretty sure Bournemouth reinvest that money, going off how the owners come across and how ambitious they are. But that would be a big blow because he's so good in Iraola's system. He's doing so well. But in terms of this Bournemouth top half bet, it is a red flag. So maybe you should wait until the window closes to be as pro Bournemouth as I am. But unfortunately, I'm on a podcast on the 8th of August, so I don't have that luxury. But if I was to pick out a price and a bet and a team who I think are going to go all the way and really put a stamp down this season, put a marker down under a really impressive, progressive coach, it's Bournemouth at plus 450 if you can get that price.
One thing I want to add on to what Sam was saying, it took them 11 or 12 matches to figure it out. I think November 11th is the date that you can point out when they beat Newcastle at home. From that point on, November 11th to the end of the season, Bournemouth had a plus 12.6 non-penalty expected goal differential, which was 4th best in the Premier League. 8.8 passes per defensive action was 3rd best behind Liverpool and Tottenham. It's a really good team.
Yeah, they are. It's going to be fun to watch them. To break our hearts. They do have I wanted to mention this when I was talking about their top 4, top 6 markets, and they do have a relatively tough start to the schedule. Their first 5 matches see them play Newcastle. They open with Forest, then they take on Newcastle, Everton, Chelsea, Liverpool. So their first 5 matches, you're talking about 3 of the teams that are expected, at least projected by the bookmakers, to be top 6 contenders. So you might, as Sam said, you might be able to just afford to wait anyways, because we saw last year that they are not a team that you can just write off after a slow start, because they came alive, as BJ said, right around the Veterans Day holiday, or Armistice Day over there for you guys. BJ, your thoughts here, top half, bottom half?
Yeah, I think there's, I like the same along the lines of Bournemouth. Like you mentioned, Michael, I think waiting until the end of the window and seeing how the first couple matches play out here might be, the right play with them, but definitely want to bet on Bournemouth. But I think a team people forgot, and Sam, you're going to learn really quickly. This is the team of the podcast. Brentford. I think people forgot about them. I think people forgot about how unlucky they were last season. They went through a point in the middle of the season where they picked up 9 points in 18 matches. And they still finished with 39 points. And in the end, Brentford had a plus 2.2 expected goal differential and 52.9 expected points on the season. That was right around the middle of the table. And we know who they are at this point under Thomas Frank. We know how good they are defending in that low defensive block. Like I mentioned, one of the stats I really like when evaluating teams that tend to play a little more passively, like Brentford, is final third to box entry conversion rate. They're consistently in the top 5 of that every single season in the Premier League. They're very versatile when they play as an underdog.
one of the stats I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head, but up until about midway point through the last season, it was something like 18 matches when they've held under 35% of the ball. They've only lost like 2 of them. And like one of them was to City and another one was when they had a red card against Aston Villa. It's just an astonishing stat. And they're just so good at playing without the ball. But I think we also forget how many injuries they sustained, and injuries to key players. The 3-5-2 system, it's really reliant on having your best fullbacks available, right? Because a team like Brentford, they're not going to dominate the middle of the pitch. Like, they are going to get the ball into wide areas and try to send in crosses. Well, Rico Henry and Aaron Hickey were injured for literally the entire season last year. So they were operating with backup fullbacks for the entire season. Ivan Toney was suspended for half the season. Brian Mbeumo had a significant injury that took him out for multiple months. Even Kevin Schade, who is the striker that they brought in to replace Ivan Toney, he was injured. So now you have everybody healthy, back and ready to go. I haven't seen anything in which Brian Mbeumo and Ivan Toney are leaving this window. I don't think anybody was really going to pay the money that Brentford is asking for. So I think that those 2 guys are going to stick with us at least through the first half of the season. And the other thing is they brought in Igor Thiago from Club Brugge, who's a really good transition striker, had a 0.81 XG per 90-minute scoring rate in the Belgian Pro League. So like, they have a lot of good different attackers. Then it's pretty much the same squad that we saw last season. So with how much they underperformed last season, and I think the market is just, they're basing it on their actual results, which is not true. I mean, the match that I keep going back to is the match where they drew United 1-1 when they absolutely pounded them, but United just snatched a late goal, and then luckily Brentford ended up drawing 1-1. But I mean, this team is so good under Thomas Frank, and they're such a fun team to bet on. And they finished in the top half 2 years ago at 5-1. And I think they can do the exact same thing here. So I like them top half finish at 4-1. And I'll save the other bet on Brentford for the next sections of the pod.
Okay, let's move on to some points totals or some points handicaps, which might be a little bit new to American bettors. Basically, you're betting, can a specific team finish within a spread, so to speak, of the top of the table. So if you bet, Liverpool plus 10 points or 10 points, can they finish within that number to whoever finishes at the top? And point totals as well, which obviously we know over here pretty well, Sam, but we'll just talk more about Bournemouth. So take it over.
Yeah, so I've got 2 more bets on Bournemouth. I do recognise that this is like the 8th bet I've put up about Bournemouth, so sorry about that. But yeah, I've gone for Bournemouth over 46 points total. So they registered 48 points last campaign, and we've already spoken about it. They navigated the first 11 games poorly, where they had to really fight to adapt to Andoni Iraola's new philosophy approach. So I think it is as easy as Bournemouth got 48 points last season, having played a third with maybe their hands tied behind their back a little bit. So now we can get plus 110 for over 46 points, a figure that they hit last season. At plus 110. So I think the bookmakers have got this wrong. This was the biggest standout for me across the whole market. I think Bournemouth are going to match what they did last season, and I think they may well coast over that 46 point line. And that brings me nicely onto my other Bournemouth bet, my 8th Bournemouth bet. Bournemouth plus 39 on the handicap at 15-1. So if we fancy them to hit over 46 points, as we just mentioned, let's say they reach 55 points this season, which I think they've got in them. If Bournemouth get the rub of the green in some games, alongside showing their quality and approaching games in a manner where they really take the game to the majority of Premier League sides, I fancy them to reach 55 points. So if you add the plus 39 handicap at 15-1 to that will get them to 94 points. If you want to be a little bit more conservative, let's say they hit 50 points, then that will get them to 89 points. So it's a total that will have them right up there. We just need them to maybe overperform a little bit, and I think they may win this at 15-1. Having a look back at last season, 2023-24, Aston Villa won the Bet365 handicap with 100 points. So they managed 68 points in the season, and they had a 32-point handicap. Then it was Arsenal, and then Bournemouth were in third, who managed 48 points. Despite 11 games at the start of the season, like we mentioned, that were poor, they had a 50-point handicap, so they ended on 98. So they were very close to Pippin Villa, who had 100. But this time around, yeah, if they overperform, we've got a shorter handicap than they did last season. But if they overperform a little this season, I think they'll be right up there again.
Yeah, I'm fully on board with this one. Basically, you're just asking, can you flip 3 of those losses into wins? And you should be in really, really good shape in this market. And you're getting 15-1 on it. I think it's a really, really good bet. BJ, anything here? Point totals and handicaps?
Well, I just want to say this handicap bet is one of the more fun bets on the board right now, because you're basically just betting who's going to overperform what the market believes. So for me, going along those same lines, I like Brentford plus 42 points. If we take what their expected points were last season at 52.9, when they sustained all those injuries and they went through this horrible run of underperformance, like that's going to get them to 94, 95 points, which could really elevate them and put them on that level. So I like them plus 42 in the handicap. I also like them over 44 points, but I need to do my yearly Manchester United rant because I like them under 64 points. What's going to change this year with United? What's going to suddenly just completely turn everything around and have them vaulted in the top 4? Because I don't see anything right now. If Eric Ten Hag is still in charge, I read something about him that made a lot of sense. Because if you remember, United over like the last 4 or 5 months of the season, were just playing, for lack of a better word, basketball matches with every team in the Premier League. I mean, they conceded 660 shots. They got outshot by 120 shots by their opponents last season. So the thing about Ten Hag is that he's a tactical extremist. So because Lisandro Martinez and Luke Shaw were injured, he thought that, well, we can't really build out of the back or else we're going to expose. So we just got to send the ball along and we just got to play transition back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But the problem is you don't have a team that's set up to play that way. The press was just, hey, let's just press with our attackers. But hey, we can't have the center backs and the fullbacks aid in the press because we're going to get exposed. So this goes all the way back to Ralph Rangnick, in my opinion, because he tried to play this pressing system with United. And if you remember, it was a complete flop over the second half of the season because the core players that United have, like Marcus Rashford, like Bruno Fernandes, etc., are not set up to play this elite high pressing system. Now, we've seen in a couple of the preseason matches, specifically the one against Liverpool, that they're starting to allow the center backs to come up and actually aid in the press. The problem is they're pressing out of a 4-4-2, and a lot of the great teams they're going to face who will build up are going to put 5 people on the back line, which is going to allow them to get overloaded. So they're continually going to be in this type of scenario where I don't think they're physical enough, and I don't think they have the right pressing system that's ever going to work with, what Ten Hag wants to do. He did bring in Ruud van Nistelrooy to, I think, help him with some of the out-of-possession stuff, which I guess is a positive step. But, United had 60 points last season. And if you look at their expected points, they had 44.2. They had a minus 12 expected goal differential. The core problem as well, aside from the pressing, is that 2 years ago, Casemiro carried their entire midfield, and it was the reason why they finished in the top 4. Relying on only Kobe Mainoo to do the exact same thing that Casemiro did is incredibly naive and not going to happen. So I think that United is in a position to completely fall off the cliff. They're going to have to play in the Europa League, which is going to require essentially more matches than they ever would have if they wouldn't have won the FA Cup. But they got nothing in their midfield that really gets me to a point where they can actually be what they were 2 years ago. Also, their offense kind of sucks. 1.34 non-penalty XG per 90 minutes last season. If you want to play a build-up style, Rasmus Højlund's not the striker that you want. Bring in Xerxes, that's a guy you want to play with a build-up system. Like, he was really good at Bologna playing, that type of system. Højlund's a transition striker. So I think they have a lot of square pegs and round holes, and I'm not sure it's getting fixed anytime soon. And what we know about Ten Hag is if things start to go south, he'll start blaming everybody else and change the system to something that they don't really need to do. And we're going to be in the exact same scenario that we were last year. So United, I think the best bet on the board, because again,
not to finish in top 6 and not to finish in top 4 are like, not to finish top 4 is like minus 400. Like not to finish top 6 is like even money or whatever. It's just not big enough a price. So I think under 64 points on the season, which is at minus 120 right now, is the best bet on the board of United. But again, we're going to have a lot of fun this year. I'm going to be betting against United quite a bit.
I'm going to be right there with you, I think.
Thank
I don't really have I don't have much more to add apart from they're lacking a real goal scoring presence up top. I like Højlund, but in terms of Premier League ready level striker up top for Manchester United to kind of take on the burden of that number 9, number 10 shirt up top, but they just don't have it. And what I really wanted to see from United with the new ownership coming on board, in terms of recruitment, was something really targeted, some interesting targets in terms of recruitment. And to be honest, I don't know much about him, Lenny Yoro, but he's an 18-year-old and they spent 60 plus million on him. Xerxes, decent, also fairly young. He's 23, 24. But they spent 100 million on two lads who I don't think are going to come in straight away and move the needle of this United team. Wanted to see something a little bit different, but it looks like maybe recruitment's going to carry on along similar lines, 60 million for an 18-year-old. And yeah, I mentioned it earlier in the show. Ten Hag's still there somehow, and I just don't think he's good enough to be Manchester United manager. He may prove me wrong, but he's had a fair while to do it, and he's still not done it. So we will see. But I'm going to be along the same lines as BJ and probably siding against them for the majority of the first half of the season anyway.
The one thing about Lenny Yoro, he is a very promising, very good young center back, but he's also going to be injured for the first 2 months of the season. And
nightmare.
Just throwing an 18-year-old in the back line of the Premier League. He was good at Lille in Ligue 1. Doing it in the Premier League is a much, much different story, especially against the caliber that he's going to be playing. So he may very well turn out to be one of the best like young center backs, but just like, throwing him in to sink or swim, especially coming off an injury, that's tough. And I'm not sure. I mean, they're going to have to play Harry Maguire back there alongside Lisandro Martinez. And, we've seen Lisandro Martinez be incredibly vulnerable to injuries. And the second he gets injured, the entire build-up system falls apart. So I don't know. I think it's a house of cards just waiting to fall.
Anything can be better than that Casemiro, Johnny Evans centre-back partnership.
God.
So they're on to a winner in that respect, I think.
Yeah, that was so bad. I remember that.
All right, how about a pro United bet? Next markets we're going to talk about Golden Boot. Marcus Rashford's 100-1. So
That's true.
you just were talking about them not having a striker option, that means why not Rashford? Like he scored 17 goals 2 seasons ago. He scored 17 2 of the last 5. Everyone is so down on him. Everyone's so down on United and Ten Hag, and there's so much kind of just tumult around the Theater of Dreams, and I understand that. So I'm just going to buy the dip here with Rashford. And is he going to win this? Is he going to score more goals than Erling Haaland? Almost certainly not. Is he going to win the Golden Boot? Almost certainly not. But he's 100-1. 2 seasons ago, he'd be near the top of the board, coming off of that 17 goal season. He's a player that I think he's streaky. If he gets going, comes out, and we see some, maybe some poor injury luck for Haaland, which is always a possibility. I think that's certainly possible and opens the door for someone. I know I'm going to endorse the fellow that you two guys are both on. Sam tipped him at the top of the show as his favorite bet for the entire season. But I think Rashford at 100-1 is actually a decent way to, if you are a United person or you want to have some sort of pro-United bets in your pocket, that'd be my favorite one. The other two I like here. I like Phil Foden. We talked about Julian Alvarez moving on. No backup for Haaland. Foden was right up there in terms of goal totals last year. So if he can throw a few more in his pocket, and if they need to spread it out a little bit more with Alvarez, and if Haaland goes down, Foden's interesting. And a guy that everybody in the world was on last year, including BJ, myself, Evan Ferguson. He's back to 100-1. What was he? What did he go off on?
He went off at 30-1, but
30-1 last year. And I know he did, and he kind of out of the gates hot, but it didn't work out. I think he ended up on 6, which is
he didn't play.
Not going to win you the Golden Boot in the Premier League.
Yeah,
but Yeah, exactly. Just didn't play enough. I think 100-1 on him is also interesting. But Rashford, honestly, is my favorite in this entire market, Sam.
Yeah, you can also get him, if you're not as brave as Michael, you can get him at plus 400 for top team goal scorer. And we see, I think Højlund's out for a number of weeks to start the season.
That's actually a great
so,
bet.
Yeah, so if you fancy him Rashford to come in the team, kind of make that spot his own out wide, then that could be a good shout. I've gone for, as you know, Alexander Isak, top goal scorer each way at 16-1. So he just ticks all the boxes for me at the prices. He's had a very quiet summer. No Euros with Sweden, no Olympic football. So looking at him in pre-season, he's looked really sharp. Eddie Howe's come out and said he's looked really sharp, as if he's arrived kind of in pre-season to do exactly the same as last year, plunder 20 goals in the Premier League, which is no mean feat. But I think it's something that he's got in him again. He's on penalties. He's a goal scorer. Callum Wilson's influence in that squad is waning. I don't even know if he'll be there come the end of the summer, but he's not. He's nowhere near the number one man up top anymore. Isak's got the pace and movement to find space in and around the box. He can get away from defenders. All he needs is that split second or two because he is so clinical, so composed. And with a player like that at the top end of the pitch, everyone behind him in that Newcastle team, they're just going to be instantly wanting to seek him out. And BJ mentioned we've got Tonali back, who is on the ball, a very good passer of the football. So the Newcastle players will know if you can get him on the ball, you have a much better chance of winning Premier League games of football. And the main concern, I mentioned it earlier, is can you keep Alexander Isak fit? Well, I'd argue that with a rested summer, with an upcoming schedule without the rigors of European competition, I'd argue his chances of playing 32, 35, 36, 37 games, I'd argue his chances are much better than last season. If you want dig into his stats from last season, he registered 20.3 XG in 25.1 90s. That is 0.81 XG per 90. That is incredible. It's not quite Erling Haaland standards, who probably should mention hit 29.2 XG in 28.4 90s. It's not quite Erling Haaland, but then again, the City front man is minus 152 to be top Premier League scorer, and Isak is 16-1. So at those prices, obviously I'm going to go with Isak, and it's big enough that you can take each way, so that Bet365 are offering top 4 places. So if Isak scores a shed load of goals, but there's just 3 players better than him, fair enough. He ends up 4th top goal scorer. He was 3rd top goal scorer last year. If that happens again, then you'll get paid out at something maybe around 3-1, a little bit less than that. So, yeah, I think it's a great bet. And like I said, it's probably my favorite outright in the Premier League.
Yeah, I'm with Sam. That's my favorite goal to boot as well. There's not much I can really add on to that. The one thing I'll just say is, betting in this market, unfortunately, because it's not as fun because we have a guy who's minus 150 to win it. You got to find somebody who can match the production of Haaland. So Haaland last season averaged 4 shots per 90 and a 1.02 XG per 90 minute scoring rate. So the one guy that ticks all those boxes, like Sam said, is Isak. Like, he maybe is not getting the shot production, but he's getting the XG per 90 production close to what Haaland does. And over the last 3 months of the season for Newcastle, when they started to play very, very aggressively, their offense was averaging 2.78 XG per 90 minutes. And obviously Isak is a huge part of that. So, with no Europe, I think Isak at 16-1 is the best value on the board as well, along with Sam.
All right, let's wrap up. We'll just go rapid fire through some of our favorite bets. I did tease a triple-digit long shot on Bournemouth. I'll give that one out in a little bit, BJ. But anything else you want to touch on before we get out of here?
Yeah, so I'm with Sam. Leicester bottom at Christmas at plus 120, I think is a great, not only the off the field stuff, but transitioning from Maresca's, system, which is primarily built out of the back high pressing, to Steve Cooper's 3-5-2 low block, is going to take some time to get used to that. So, we've seen a lot of times when teams transition, when they come in, not even when they come into the Premier League, but when they transition systems, it takes them a long time to figure that out. So bottom at Christmas on top of the points deduction at plus 120, I think is a great bet. I have a trifecta: Arsenal, Liverpool, City. as your front three. I think that Liverpool is kind of interesting, for lack of a better term, and I think that there's a chance that they're way better under Arne Slot than they were under Jurgen Klopp. The thing that Slot will do is he will force Liverpool to start to control matches more often. And the thing about Klopp was, he was a gambler in the sense of just like, we're going for this. We're playing transition. We're going back and forth, and we're not going to have much control of matches, but we're going to be better in transition than you. So in the end, it works out, right? Like the ceiling of what Klopp had was really high, but you also lower your floor when you're, not having control of matches. Slot is not only going to give them control and raise their floor, but out of possession, he's doing the exact same things that Klopp was doing. So, Liverpool has had kind of a quiet summer. Zubamendi looks like is coming in from Real Sociedad, which is a really, really good signing in terms of defensive midfield, which is something they really need. So I think that there is a world where Liverpool is right up there with City and Arsenal, maybe even leading the Premier League for an extended period. But I do believe Arsenal is the best team in the Premier League and them to win. And if you think that City is going to kind of fall off, well, an Arsenal, Liverpool, City trifecta is 25-1, which I think is a really good price on that as well. And finally, my guy, Martin Odegaard, for most assists at 16-1, led the Premier League with 11.2 expected assists last season. De Bruyne is obviously the favorite. Question mark with him is not only is he going to get the assist, but can he stay healthy? If he's battled injury last season and the season before that as well. If he can't stay healthy, especially with all the matches that City's going to have, I'm not sure he's going to get enough matches to potentially win this award. But Odegaard, again, is the conductor of Arsenal's offense, and again, led the Premier League in expected assists. So I don't think he should be 16-1. I think he should be closer to one of the favorites, around 8 or 9-1.
Okay. For me, Bournemouth is 400-1 to be the top team at Christmas.
Love it.
It's not good. It's not going to happen. But
like 10 matches in, if they're up there, I mean, this
exactly.
You're
sitting with a 400-1. Exactly. And this is my thinking here is I'm expecting a step back from each of the top 2 to 3 teams, right? Like Liverpool, City, and Arsenal. If you look at the past 2 years, the table at Christmas, you basically needed between 37 and 40 points to finish at the top. It's asking a lot out of Bournemouth to get that from their first 17 games. But if you look at the Christmas table last year, so Arsenal was at the top at 40, then it was Liverpool and Villa at 39, Spurs 36, City was 34th. There is a universe here where Bournemouth can be the Villa team, right? They can be the team that just nips at the heels through those first few months of the season. City's a notorious slow starter. Arsenal is going to have a fixture pile up as we get closer to the holidays. Liverpool, who knows with the new manager. There's enough of a pathway here that you're getting 400-1 on a team that the ceiling could just be really, really high on this Bournemouth team. It could be where Brighton was a couple seasons ago. It could be where Villa was last year. Who knows how high it is? So the way I want to bet into that is by taking at least one big shot on them. 400-1 definitely satisfies that need. In Sam, I know in England, Christmas is a huge deal. It's obviously a huge deal here in the Basque country. Their version of Santa Claus is Olent Zero, and he looks great. He's looks much cooler. I love the way Santa Claus looks, but this guy is a much cooler version of Santa. He smokes a pipe. He's got a walking stick. He wears one of those Basque berets. If Bournemouth can come through with this bet, Andoni Iraola will become my Santa. I'll start believing in Olent Zero rather than Saint Nick. So 400-1 on Bournemouth. That is my. I think. Look, it's not the bet that I think has the best chance of cashing, and that I've given out tonight, but it is my actual, the one that I'm going to hold near and dear to my heart the most here, and it'll probably be done. It'll probably be cooked when they lose their first 2 matches too. Other than that, the other 2 bets I want to talk about, I like Dwight McNeil in the most assists market at 50-1. He's going to be taking those corners for Everton, and they've just got so many big lads that they can just throw the ball into. He's great on set pieces. He's 50-1. Do you know who led the league in assists last year, BJ? I was shocked when I saw this.
I do. It was Ollie Watkins.
Yeah, Ollie Watkins at 13. Then it was Cole Palmer at 11. So it's not a huge number that you're asking from. I think McNeil can at least be around there. And then, of course, the Golden Gloves. I don't know who's going to start for Crystal Palace, whether it's going to be Sam Johnson or Dean Henderson. It sounds like Sam Johnson might go to Wolves, but I've got no clue who's going to start. But whoever is their starting goalie, they're both at 33-1 right now. I'm going to wait for that to sort of settle itself out as close as I can get to opening day in a couple days. I'm going to back one of them at 33-1. Last year was David Raya at 16. Jordan Pickford was second at 13. And I think you're this bet doesn't really equate to the best team. It's just very random. So because you look at the top four, Bernd Leno and Jordan Pickford were in there along with Ederson and Raya. So you could see a surprise. So Bournemouth 400-1 top at Christmas. One of the Palace goalies, whoever's going to start, 33-1, and then McNeil most assists to wrap up the show for me. Sam, what about you?
Sorry, 1 sec. I'm just making it a parlay. Oh, you can't put them together. All right, no worries. That was going to be a big one. I was going to do Henderson, Bournemouth, and McNeil, but
that'd be great.
That would be great. Maybe I'll
never see any of us again.
Oh,
I'll send Bet365 a message.
Maybe just McNeil and Henderson. Can we do that?
Maybe.
With Everton to stay up.
I'm going to find
Everton
out.
to be relegated with those two. That'd be funny. Now that'd be funny.
What have I got left of the show? I've got one bet. Ipswich, top promoted club. Points deduction for Leicester. I won't go on about it. But for me, in this market, I'm just forgetting about them. I'm scratching them from the conversation. I think they're going to finish last. I don't think they're going to be able to catch up to the other clubs with the deduction. So for me, we've essentially got a season match bet of Southampton at 1.83 and Ipswich at 3.00. Obviously decimal, sorry. And I just don't think that's right. I foresee the performance from these two clubs this season of being really close together. I don't know who's going to finish as the top promoted club. I'm not too sure, but I am sure that the prices here at Bet365 plus 400 for Ipswich, I don't think it's right. So in that case, I'm pretty sure the value is on Ipswich. So therefore, I'm going to go, Ipswich, top promoted club, plus 400. Southampton needed playoffs to get up out of the Championship. So I think they should be priced similarly. And like I said, I worry for Russell Martin and his style of play in the Premier League. I think he might get found out. So at the prices, plus 400. I'll take that.
Luton Town was the top promoted team last year at 3-1. So
crazy.
Can happen again.
All right. That'll do it for this, our Premier League preview. Hopefully we left you with enough bets to get you through the next few days before we get to Manchester United and Fulham on Friday, August the 16th. Of course, we'll preview match week 1. We'll go match by match for the Premier League, talk some other matches that are going on that weekend as well. BJ and I will be back to do a preview for the other European leagues. Then we'll, a couple of weeks, we'll be getting into Champions League stuff. But this is the beginning of another long season of soccer, so you're going to be hearing from us quite a bit from now until May. Thank you to our sponsors, Bet365. As always, thank you to you, the listener. Thank you to our producers on the back end. Best of luck putting together your season-long Premier League portfolio. We'll see you in a couple of days.